Hey everybody, Coach Hughes here with the Be Best You podcast. And again, the idea is in order to lead others or be the best version of yourself, whether it be in a family or at work, you need to be the best version of yourself because no one's going to follow somebody that is a mess, right? I'm really excited to have on this episode Joe Navarro. Well, hello, Joe. How are you, sir?
Good, John. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor, honestly. I was in my class. I teach about nonverbal communication, and I'm not an expert by any means, and I'm learning. And then one of the attendees came up to me, who actually was in college. He was in criminal justice,
Oh,
and he ended up not continuing that career. But he had told me about this book that he absolutely loved, which is really the reason I reached out to you. And you have several books which I will share with everybody. We can chat about, but this book in particular here, which I love, is "Every Body," BODY, has a saying. Um, and once I got it, I want to learn more. And then you were kind enough when I reached out to accept the offer. Um, but if you could maybe just let everybody know a little bit about your esteemed career. Obviously, I see again many years in the FBI, but if you would just let people know like a little bit about that, that would be
no,
helpful.
I'm happy to, John. It's always good to talk to a coach. Some of the best times I ever had was during my college years there in Miami, Florida. I was every summer I was a coach during the summer, and I love those kids.
Mm.
There's nothing like getting out there and see them learn a skill like how to shoot a basketball or some of them it was the first time they were playing volleyball,
Okay.
and it was just really nice to be with them. And then went to college, and then all of a sudden the FBI approached me, and for 25 years I spent it in the FBI catching spies. And then when I retired, I was asked to collect my thoughts on what I had learned over the years about nonverbal communications, and ended up writing that book you just showed, the what every body is saying,
Yeah.
which is incredible because it went on to be translated into 32 languages, over 1 million sold. And if you had told me that when I was writing it, I would have been happy if 2,000 people had bought into it. But I think it resonates because I think we all have an interest in nonverbals, especially those of us like yourself who are coaching.
Mm.
And a coach has to read a team all at once. It's not just one player at a time. You've got to be able to see, who's coming in and with the head hanging low, or who needs a little bit of encouragement, or things like that. And
Mm.
managers really are in a way the front line of observation. Is if you've got a team that's not performing, that's not doing this, they're not treating customers right, it really is about, am I reading my employees correctly? Am I reading my clients correctly, or my guests? So it's something that we can all benefit from, because one of the things I always say, no matter what you do, we're really all in the people business, and nobody more so than in coaching
Mm.
or especially middle management. We're all in the people business.
Yeah, I'm smirking because anybody who knows me listens to this. That's my go-to. And ironically, so my dad was a high school basketball coach, and I'll show you a funny picture real quick of one of my slides that I use in class. And interestingly enough, do coaching. So this is a picture that I'll use with, and it's Stephon Curry with Steve Kerr.
Oh
And
yeah.
in doing this presentation, I'm a fan of them, and I did. My wife doesn't know anything about basketball, and the hands on the hips and the way Steve Kerr is looking at Kerr, she thought that Stephon Curry, the player, was getting yelled at and
Yeah.
was waiting for the coach to stop. and she might not be wrong because I wasn't there at that picture. But if you know them, you're like, no, that's not what was happening. And I go into that. So what I love
Yeah.
about your book is just
No,
all these
yeah,
miscues.
that in fact, that's a great photograph because most people misunderstand the hands on the hips. That's
Mm,
arms akimbo. And a lot of you see athletes all the time stand that way. And the reason they do it is I'm ready.
yeah.
Put me in, just point the way, whatever. But it's a very silent way of saying I'm paying attention.
Mm,
I'm ready to do whatever you ask of me. And so yeah, there oftentimes there's a lot of misunderstanding. The other thing, it's interesting, people forget on the floor how loud it is.
mm,
And you say, why was the coach yelling? Well, because he wouldn't have been heard.
mm,
It's those little things that you pick up along the way.
right.
You see the same in the military, in the Marine Corps. Those hands on the hips, arms akimbo, say, "I'm ready. I'm paying attention," and it's always good to know.
Yeah, and what I do is you look at everything from the head being cocked to, the intensity of the eyebrows, the look. Sometimes it looks like you're angry, maybe it's intense, and through your book. And I do have to ask you, I wrote a little note. How much fun did you have taking some of the pictures throughout the book? Because some of them were obviously exaggerated for the purpose of your thing, but you must
Yeah.
have done a lot of laughing at those pictures.
It was this was the first book
Yeah,
that we were taking pictures for, and I had asked a friend to take them. So in a way, I was an amateur at this because, when you're an agent, as I was, you're really a paid observer. Whether you're on surveillance or you're even interviewing somebody, you're really observing most of the time and then writing it down, contemporaneous notes. So, when it came time to, okay, so how do I put that into a book? Because life isn't a picture. Life is more like a movie. And it's like, how do I capture? So sometimes the behavior has to be exaggerated. I'll give you an example. It's a behavior we use to say that it's called resigned acceptance or acceptance. In fact, you did it just a few minutes ago, and it's simply like this. It's an
yeah,
upside down U of your lips. You go like this,
yeah. Well, it's so
right?
funny getting ready for this. I joked with my wife. I said I'm going to be so self conscious, like what I'm doing. But it's so
No, but
true
it's
though. Sure.
but it's a teaching point, and it's
Yeah.
and it's a silent way of saying, "Oh yeah, I see your point." Yeah,
Yeah.
and we go on, and that's the beauty of nonverbals, is that it's so fast. One of the Williams sisters was playing tennis, and the coach said, from the way she walked on the court, from looking at her face, I knew that today was not going to be her day. And
Mm,
just think about that.
mm,
And that's the kind of thing that a coach picks up.
mm,
They can pick up the subtle nuances of that someone is already mentally not in a good place. And I remember, gosh, probably 30 or more years ago, I was dealing with American Airlines at the time, and one of the senior people there that had started up being a gate agent and worked their way up said, I can always tell when there's going to be someone problematic in the line. I said,
mm,
really? How? And he says, I just watch their body language.
mm,
Everybody else has a certain look. Everybody else is walking a certain pace. These individuals already 5, 6, 7 back are agitated. They don't look happy. They're not smiling, and sure enough, and he went on to teach what to look for. so you can avoid problems. So I think it's true, and I think the book is a testament to all the research that's been done now.
Mhm.
Harvard professor Amdali uh, talked about thin slice assessments, where in milliseconds, people were able to assess what was someone being open and kind and happy and generous, or were they going to be a problem or difficult. So the research is really ample, and I think the best thing that we can do, as you've done, John, is we can always learn a little bit more. We can always train ourselves a little more.
Yeah. You know, and one of the things is how to determine who do you hire, say in any business. And I was actually on Continental Airlines and was going through whatever, and there you are talking about how to do an interview. So I thought that was pretty neat. But one thing I've learned is I tell people, don't ask questions to hear answers, create questions to see answers.
Mm.
Um, and one of the other slides I have, I'm going to spin it, but I talk about how there's first impressions. So you as a leader, when you walk in a room, people are making a
Yeah.
judgment on you. There's percentages of time, but then also we're judging other people. And this idea of, as we're talking, I'm focusing on trying to be an active listener, yet I'm already thinking about something else I want to say or a question I
Sure.
want to ask. And one of the things that I would want to talk to you about was being an active listener is you can't wait for the other person to stop talking, or you can't listen when you're talking. And as you were talking, I'm listening, but I'm also thinking about the next question, which I'm
Right.
sure my body language was. So then I'm thinking about that as well. So there's a lot, but what, the importance of one, being an active listener as a leader,
Yeah.
but then two, how do you also know when somebody isn't listening? Because people will tell you yes. I use one quick example where somebody wasn't, they were just out of sorts. I knew
Yeah.
it. And I asked them, is there anything wrong? And they went, no, which their tone said, their words
Yeah.
said no, the tone wasn't it, but their body language just, and there was something else going on. And I said, you're not being honest with me.
Yeah.
So listening with your eyes, I think. And then the last thing to kind of set this kind of long answer, because I just thought about this before what's the universal language of our species isn't Spanish, English, Mandarin. It's always been body language, and we don't teach it.
Indeed. Indeed. So there's a lot of good stuff in there you're
Yeah, sorry
asking.
about that.
No, 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 no. I think these are questions that are very valid. Let me go backwards. Body language remains the principal means by which we as humans communicate. Now, people will say, "Oh, that can't be. I send emails. I really." How do you assess for trust? How do you assess for security? How do you when you look through the peephole when somebody rings? What, you just listen to whatever they say and you let them in? We're looking at nonverbals. When somebody speaks to you with kindness, when somebody gazes upon you and appreciates you as a coach. I remember these little 8, 9 year old kids. Anything you told them about how to shoot a basketball, they were just mesmerized by that. They're so appreciative, and they do it with their eyes. That's all nonverbals.
Right.
We pick our mates based on nonverbals. And so it remains the primary means by which we communicate. We know that we can interpret a lot from the moment we're born. A baby smiles, the mother smiles. The mother smiles, the baby smiles. As early as 36 hours, we're already mirroring each other. What we forget to do as we grow older is we forget how we can use body language, right?
Yeah.
To convey a message. I often tell this. I was at a years ago. I was at a military academy, and I said, the American military has a uniform that is designed so that snipers can't take advantage. If you look at a general walking from behind and a corporal walking from behind, they have the same uniform,
Mm.
but they walk different. They carry themselves different. They even turn differently.
Yeah.
And it says in an instant, you can figure out who the general is.
Now, is that it? Because that's the other thing. Is that intentional? Meaning that's trained, right?
That's training. That's carrying yourself as an officer. An officer doesn't have jittery gestures. An officer carries themselves
Mm,
with dignity. They use broad but smooth gestures. The
mm,
lower you go in rank, right? The more erratic the gestures, and so one of the areas that we lack in is number one, we're not taught, but we're also not taught how to project ourselves differently.
mm.
um uh, Getting back to and I forgot the first part of what you were asking about, but it'll come to me. That number one is we're always communicating.
Mm.
Okay, our bodies are always communicating, and if I'm in a position of trust, if I'm in a leadership position, whether I'm coaching a team of 8 or 16 or 32 or 60, it doesn't matter. What you have to remember is those eyes are always on me.
Mm.
And what I transmit to them has significance. And if I'm worried, if I'm biting my lip, if I'm doing a lot of neck massaging and rubbing of the back of the neck, that is transmitted. I'll give you an example. I always use, and I say, when I see a person that I don't know walking down the street with a big dog, I never worry about the dog. The only thing I worry about is the person handling the dog. Do they know how to handle the dog? Is the dog walking ahead? Is the leash too tight? Because if that leash is loose, that's perfect. This person knows how to handle a dog. But somebody who is neurotic, is pulling on the dog, doesn't control it, that energy is transferred. And I've seen it with military units. I've seen it with FBI supervisors who channel that negative energy
Mm.
into situations, and I've seen it with management. You go into one location and you say, "Gosh, everybody's happy here. Everybody treats each other with respect. Everybody gets along, and so forth." And then you have other locations where people are on edge.
Yeah.
Hey, it's like, well, what piece of paper makes the difference? There is no piece of paper that makes a difference. The only thing that makes a difference is your body language. It's your tone of voice. It's how you carry yourself. It is how you transact the business that you're in. And it's
Mm.
not selling this or buying that. You are in the people business. And you asked a question: how do I bring on board individuals that satisfy that which is most important? Number one, that they will prioritize the client, that they will prioritize responsibility, that they will prioritize being ethical.
Mm.
And obviously, that's one of the most difficult things to do, is how do we get people on board? And the other part that and that has to be through the interview process, where we ask the right questions, where we uh, uh, you know uh, ask for examples
Mhm.
of these things. But let me also address the other question that you had. In one of my books, 3 Minutes to Doomsday, there was an interview I did that lasted 12 hours. Now that's 12 hours of going through what you were just talking about of I'm listening, but I'm also registering what was said and then preparing for the next question. All I can tell you is that's a skill set. Now you call it, for years, and I don't know, back into the in the 80s, people came up with this term of active listening.
Hmm.
It is merely listening, but proper listening requires, as you said, the eyes. It requires the careful observation of the individual as they transit through various performances. They may be leaning forward 1 minute or leaning away or scratching their head when you ask a tough question.
Yeah.
There's any number of behaviors that may manifest as a result of something that you ask. And then we have to decide, do I address this now or do I address this later?
Hmm.
So, for me, when I'm teaching executives, I have to retrain them and say, probably when you were onboarded, you were just asked questions.
Mhm.
Part of asking questions, due diligence, is observation of all information that is available. As you said earlier, you ask somebody a question, and by the manner they answered, the quickness of it, the sharpness, and their body language, you detected that there was an issue.
Mhm.
Because you never know when people are being deceptive. And so then the question is, do I address it right then, or do I save it
Yeah.
so that then I can come back and revisit that to see if I get that reaction again? And I'll give you an example from the book. What everybody is saying. It was a case in Yuma, Arizona. I went
All
out
right.
to
That's what I was thinking. Are you going to tell me about the mom and the young man?
yeah. As
Yeah.
it turns out, the man had been a fugitive for a while. And I always thought, if you're going to run and escape, where would you go? I would go back to my mom. I don't know what it is. And sure enough, he was living in New Jersey, and so I went to her house, and and she was a little nervous, but you always have that when an FBI agent shows up. But when I asked, is it possible that your son sneaks into the house? I was giving her an escape. Is it possible your son gets into the house while you're at work and stays here? And she immediately put her fingers right up against the lower part of her throat. This is the suprasternal notch, and was clutching that. And then I went on to other questions and so forth. And then when I asked again, I said, you work long hours, and he could be sneaking in here and be hiding. And right away, her
Yeah.
fingers came back. And in the end, um, he was in the house, and to this day, I lucked out because he was armed and he could have easily have shot me.
Sure.
But it was based on the body language, and so we can learn if I'm in management and I have to bring people on board. Well, I'm going to have to learn how to ask questions.
Hmm.
And I'm going to have to learn how to listen for what's important. What do they say? When do they say it? The primacy of what they say, the words that they use. But I'm also, as you said, using my eyes. Is there harmony between their emphasis, verbal emphasis, and their body language? If you have somebody that says, I love working with people, right? But
Yeah.
but then you have somebody says, "Oh, I love working with people," but you don't see any gravity-defying behaviors. I have to say, okay, I'm going to need some examples of that. See, you just did that
Yeah.
acceptance
That
with the lips.
aha moment, like, well, huh? Well, I think of two things. One,
Yeah,
well, there's about 40 questions, so I'm going to try to focus to two.
yeah,
One of the things is in the industry I'm in, a lot of people are in a position of hiring. They hire to fill a need, all those kind of stuff, but they hire off of first interview, which I tell them that's the worst thing to do because they're usually making that decision off of a verbal answer.
right.
And then the second part, Crow, is so a quick longer story, but when I got married a second time, my current wife and we're Catholic, and we had to meet with the priest. We filled out 98 questions. Eight of
Right.
them were about pets. He loved pets. My wife, now my current wife, wanted a dog. I didn't want a dog.
Yeah.
And during the thing, he said, "John, will you tell Nancy why you don't want a dog?" Now, I had told him in private, and it was kind of a funny story, but and I was like, well, why'd you do that to me? He kind of threw me under the bus. But I
Yeah.
started telling him why I didn't want a dog. Meanwhile, Nancy is staring right at me.
Yeah.
And he said, John, women talk like this
Yeah.
and men talk like this. And what I realized at that moment is going through a divorce and not wanting to go through that again. I
Yeah.
realized what he was saying was one is I need to learn how to listen, but listen and then talk at the same time. It was so those two things. If you and then maybe there's a third, so I'll write them down here. But
Yeah.
goes back to something bigger. I have the biggest part of my audience that I work with is young people who are now in a position of leadership.
Mm.
And there's this idea of how do I teach them to be a professional? And they come in and their shirts are untucked and they have 3 day scruff and their hats are dirty. And
Right.
but that's no one's ever taught, you don't want to tell somebody to clean up. At my age, you had to be clean shaven, you had to, look a
Right.
certain look. But I have not a hard time, I'm getting better at it, but you were speaking about as a leader, everybody's watching them and the importance of
Yeah.
their posture, their shirts being baggy or not baggy,
Yeah.
their preparedness, their seriousness. So you had that going back to the higher officer and the lower officer and how they have to carry themselves.
Right.
So
So
there's three things there. I apologize, but
yeah, no, you're good at stringing questions.
yeah, I don't know if that's
No,
good or
no,
just
it's fine.
ADD.
So let me see if I can address those. What I tell people, especially young people, because a lot of them have never been told, um, y- y- the Brits have a great term. I'm married to my wife is from England, and they just say, well, you got to look smart. And that's it. That's code for you got to sharpen up. And a lot of young people, it's almost like teachers and even their parents are scared to tell them
Yes,
that how you dress matters, how you groom matters, that you cannot expect to be treated the same if you look sloven, if you haven't groomed yourself. That our species, the human species, right? It is universal. When Captain Cook in the 1700s arrived in what is now Tahiti, he had no problem. A mile and a half offshore, takes out his spyglass. He looks on the coastline, which is full of people that had turned out to see this magical vessel that had just arrived for the first time. And he said, "That's the chief." Now, how did he know that? In the same way that when Sir Richard Burton in 1886 or 1868 went up uh, the Nile River to find its source, all the way up into Uganda, he had no problem finding who the chief of each tribe was.
Yeah.
In every culture that has ever been studied, those that were in charge dressed differently, walked differently, attach specific things to them. When Cortez arrived in Mesoamerica in what is now Mexico, he didn't have to say, "Take me to your leader." He could see the leader because it is inherent in us. Now, this is in our DNA. Now, you can
Mm.
go out there, and I tell this to people all the time, you can dress any way you want, but don't expect to be treated the same as someone who looks refined, who is clean, who is properly attired. And yes, there is a properly attired,
Yeah.
and they will be treated differently. And I get this all the time. Well, it shouldn't be that way and it's not fair. Hey, life is hard and then we die. Get real.
Well, this should be your next book, by the way,
Just get
because I'm telling you,
real, because
yeah,
what world do you live in other than a pampered one? You go around the world. I've been all over the world, and you go to different places around the world and you better be dressed properly.
mhm,
You better be dressed properly,
mhm,
because people there, society there has no problem. I remember being in Greece, and and this loudmouth teenager decides to go into a Greek Orthodox church in a bikini, and she was promptly thrown out.
mm.
Is how dare you?
I can hear it in your voice.
It
Yeah,
it's culturally offensive. It
right.
is offensive in every way. Unfortunately, people nowadays think that the world needs to revolve around them. Those people that think that way are going to have great difficulty in life.
But you're
Um,
also not saying to conform, and I think that's, well, why do I have to, fit a social norm? What? No, being clean and neat and buttoned down is that I'm not saying you have to wear a uniform and be a robot, but they rail against it, and I think that literally, I think there needs to be a book out there on this because I haven't found one yet. I found it a little bit in
yeah.
what you showed me, but what you just said right there,
Take a look at there's a book I wrote. It was based on my lectures at the Harvard Business School that I had given over a series of time. And the book is called Louder Than Words.
oh,
And it
okay,
really
yep,
gets in, not only does it get into it, but it gets into the research behind
perfect.
why dress matters. I think part of the problem too is we have parents who forget that their role is to say no. They think their role is just to say yes to everything. But the role is to say no, that there are certain things that are not permitted at certain times and in certain places. And that proper attire contributes to a harmonious setting,
Mhm.
an event, um, and this isn't one of the areas that I specialize in, but I certainly see the effects of it in the business sector,
Yeah,
where yeah, I'll give you an example. There are businesses that will not accept as an employee someone that has tattoos on their
right,
neck or their face.
right.
And I have teenagers and 20-year-olds write and say that's not fair. What can I tell you?
Yeah. Uh,
And you're going to pay a price for that. Now, you may find another job where that's acceptable. But I know fire departments, police departments,
right.
in the financial sector, there's certain things that they will not tolerate.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, I remember an attorney, fairly large firm. I mean, they had 20 attorneys and I think a total of 33, 34 staff, who told me that when they decided that they were going to relax their attire so that you had dress down Fridays. Um, One of the things that happened, and I thought it was interesting, is that how people talk to each other changed. It became too relaxed, too
Mm.
informal, and actually it affected the words. I don't want to say that they began to swear, but it got a little
I can see
um,
that. I can see that happening. Yeah,
and he told me we had to go back. Now you could look in the scientific literature and say, well, we haven't really studied that. We don't have a lot of evidence, and that's anecdotal. Here's the problem. A client comes in and sees how people are dressed
mm,
and how they talk to each other, and it affected business. And
100%.
they just you know, put the kibosh on that. Look, you know, there's such a thing as what's called the beauty dividend, and that is that from a study that was done, beautiful people tend to earn more, up to 8-10% more. But here's the thing. You know, you don't have to be absolutely beautiful. You just have to be well dressed and well groomed.
Sure.
And from the studies my company has done, we found you can achieve the same results, because we like going into a business where you can tell that people care about themselves, and I think that's significant.
Especially in the food and the service business. You know, another big thing, body language. I know I threw a bunch of other questions, but I think one other important part is um, what I talk to guys is this hard skill and the soft skill. And a lot of the newer managers worked hard to get to where they are. They're given an opportunity. They've never really led before. They've been always been part of a team. Maybe they've led one or other two
Mm.
people on a team, but now they have to lead everybody. And
Right.
you get into this thing where they want to be liked. They want to please everybody. They, you know, everything from they don't know how to delegate. But one of the things that you had mentioned, um, you know, whether it's conflict resolution, whatever the term is, but this idea of de-escalating either a situation with today in the service industry, customers are literally coming in and trying to provoke
Oh
kids
yeah.
today. You got that going on. Then you have you're now a man, you were an employee, maybe you're a shift supervisor. Now you're the manager, and now you're leading your friends. So now that there's it's just you were friends. Now there's conflict because you're telling them what to do.
Right.
Or even when you're not happy with your supervisor and you don't want to be submissive and you need to get back.
Yeah.
What are some tips on and what is the terminology of today? I used to
Yeah.
call it again like conflict resolution, but
Yeah. Yeah. So, two big questions there, and I'll address them. You're always going to have this situation where, you know, now you're the boss or the manager, and now you've got to ask Sally or Sam or Lakeisha or Mike, you got to work Saturday. And that just comes with a job. And, you know, I often have had interactions with young managers, and I said, always front it. And they said, what do you mean? They
hmm,
say, you just got promoted. The first thing you do is you get together with the team and you say, hey, gang, I just got promoted. That means I'm going to be asked to do things and say things that are required of me.
hmm,
So it's up to you to realize how that is going to affect you, because it's not up to me to figure that out. It's up to you to figure that out. Now, some of you will like it, some of you won't like it. Been there, done that. But some of you I will ask to work on Saturday. Some of you I will ask to clean up. I was in the service industry, John, when I was very young. Back when there were no social security cards, I worked in hotels, cleaning tables. I was a busboy. And I remember one night after cleaning, it was a big convention. I just finished cleaning. It was about 11:30 at night. I was underage, and the guy says to me, and I had school the next day, and he says, "You got to help set up for tomorrow."
Mm.
And so, covering the tables, silverware, everything else. And I didn't like it, but it's what you have to do. But it was never personal. Is you can be upset with the task, but I think if you clarify it up front with the manager and say, "Look, I have to tell you that somebody has to stay," and I think that was a good advice because he was the chief busboy. This hotel was, well, I can tell you the name of the hotel. It was the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach.
Okay.
And as to your other question, and that is de-escalation.
Mm.
And there are things that we can do. And the first thing is when I teach de-escalation, I say the first thing you have to remember is that it's up to you, that you cannot expect the other person to de-escalate because they may not want to de-escalate. And there's plenty of videos out there where, I mean, people just, they're asking, and I think you have to have a policy in place. Number one, it's up to me to de-escalate. And number two, I can do it non-verbally by doing this, using my voice to talk even lower,
Mm.
right? Number two, create distance so that I'm not in the person's face. Number three, probably the most critical, is to avoid direct eye contact. Direct eye contact is very intimidating. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a spot, either just above the eyes or somewhere right here. And that's where I'm going to look at the person, but I'm not going to directly look at their eyes because that often incenses them even more. And then lastly, I'm going to angle my body.
Mm.
It's easier to argue with somebody when they're directly in front of you. It's tough to argue with somebody when they're at an angle to you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the easiest ways to begin to de-escalate. If you maintain that voice, right? We call that prosody. If you can maintain, and it's hard, believe me. I
Yeah.
have been yelled at, screamed at. I've had things thrown at me. I've had it all done to me. I've had whole families confront me at a door
Mm.
when serving a warrant, and it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah.
You just have to, and one of the things companies can do is have exercises where they actually rehearse things like that,
Mm.
so that you don't have to think about it. The minute somebody starts yelling, you move back a little bit, angle, look somewhere else on the face,
Mm.
and you practice keeping that low voice. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. We didn't intend to do that. No, we didn't. Right. And you just
Yeah.
maintain that. Meanwhile, you have somebody yelling at them. Now, the military does this. They hire actors sometimes, or they take another class to yell at the officers or whatever. As those that are going forward deployed, what's it like to go into a hostile environment where everybody's yelling at you and you just
Imagine.
maintain your cool? You just maintain your cool. But we can't expect everybody to know this. This is a skill set that people in the front lines, whether you're working in the airlines or in the food industry or so forth, you're going to have to learn. And it doesn't take that long,
Yeah.
maybe an hour of training, but it's invaluable because now the first time you're confronted with somebody who, number one, may be irrational and potentially someone you could deal with eventually, or you have someone that is mentally having
Right.
schizophrenic a break or something. You just never know. Um, and you have to be able to deal with that and put aside the yelling.
Yeah.
It's like a baby. At some point, you when you're sitting in that airplane and the baby next to you is crying, and you say, you know what, I'm going to enjoy this in spite of in
Your
spite of the
mindset. Yeah.
and so you sort of tune out the crying. But that's my best advice for oh, and the other thing is always ask them for your name. What is your name, sir? So that I can properly address you.
Mm.
What is your name, sir? And it's incredible how often these little techniques work.
It's, I mean, and I know we have to wrap up, and I have 1,000 other questions, but and it, again, it goes back to, my son with autism, and how does learn, what's happening at the kitchen table today with the politics of the world, how to interview people, how you're being judged by. I really feel like this is something that this book, and then this particular topic, um, for me in my career, what I'm doing, I spend more time on this than anything else. I just came out of a class. I had 70 people. It's 5 days. You ask questions, they give you answers, yet you can tell they're disinterested. I watch for the aha moments. So
Yeah,
now I know that there's I will supply a link to your website that you have and the material and the books. I know that there's some classes that you've put on. I think some TED Talk. I think you did a TED Talk as
I
well.
have. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. Yeah, if they're interested in any of this stuff, I've written over 100 articles for Psychology Today. I've got 14 books. Anything at all interested that
Yeah.
you can go to joenavarro.net and find just about everything that I have to
Well,
offer.
honestly, it's an honor to get, one, thank you for your service. This is kind of a labor of love for me. I'm a consummate learner, coaching. I love this stuff. Gets me super excited. And I thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast. Once I edit it, I will make sure I send it to you so you're happy with everything. And then I will be continuing to gobble up all your information. And I think that, this is 1 million copies, but it should be more than that, because everybody should grab this, not just to promote it, but just so that we get along better.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, John. And I appreciate you working with young people and older ones. I think that's the best that we can do. Thank you for having me.
Thank
It's
you.
my pleasure, and maybe we'll get to talk again. And thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Sure, and I will. I know there's multiple franchisees and business people I know that would even like to even reach out on their level to see if there's other things that they can do to train their people. All right.
Well,
So
that would be very nice. All right. Well, it's good talking to
you too,
you.
sir.
Take care, and remember, de-escalate, distance,
Yeah,
angles. Don't look intently, and have a good day. All
I
right,
love it.
John.
I love it. I'll follow up with an email. Thank you.
All right. Take
All right.
care.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.